Hi everybody, thank you for joining me as I continue my examination of Norman Geisler and Frank Turek's I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist from an Atheist Perspective. In this video I'm going to cover Chapter 4, which is titled Divine Design. And in this chapter, Geisler and Turek turn their attention from the cosmological argument, which we covered in the previous chapter, to the teleological argument, which stated formally says every design had a designer. The universe has a highly complex design. Therefore, the universe had a designer. This is the argument from design, the fine-tuning argument, the teleological argument. The design of the universe implies a designer. Quote, Isaac Newton implicitly confirmed the validity of the teleological argument when he marveled at the design of our solar system. He wrote, "This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being." And I feel I have to point out the Newton quotation is only evidence for Newton's opinion. It's not evidence for any actual facts about reality or the nature or the history of the universe. Isaac Newton was a giant of the early days of science, one of the most important minds ever, and he is rightly celebrated. But would we be better off basing our opinions on the supposed design of the universe on the body of scientific knowledge as it exists today, or as it existed during Newton's lifetime 300 years ago? Which makes more sense to you? I know which makes more sense to me. From Newton, they move on to William Paley and his watchmaker analogy. Every watch needs a watchmaker, which asks us to imagine if we discovered a watch laying on the ground, would we assume that the watch had been the product of natural forces, or would we assume that the watch had been made by an intelligent maker? Geisler and Turek claim that the universe is such a watch, that the universe is even more precise in its design than a pocket watch discovered in the forest would be. In fact, the universe is designed specifically with us in mind. Geisler and Turek say life on Earth was the specific purpose of the design of the universe. And this, they inform us, is what is known as the anthropic principle. They say, quote, "The anthropic principle is just a fancy title for the mounting evidence that has many scientists believing the universe is extremely fine-tuned, designed to support human life here on Earth." There are those weasel words again. They keep using those. Many scientists. Well, which scientists? Where can I read the work of these scientists who have found evidence that the universe is fine-tuned for human existence? Or more than that, intelligently designed overall. Where can I read the work of these scientists? I would love to know. Houston, we have a problem is the next section of this chapter. This is where Geisler and Turek make a bold attempt to get on my good side by telling a story about the manned space program, specifically the Apollo 13 mission, but wind up getting way, way far on my bad side because of how shamelessly they exploit and abuse the Apollo 13 story in a desperate attempt to try and illustrate their stupid argument. So they use the Apollo 13 mission, which of course was the mission where the astronauts nearly died. An oxygen tank exploded in their spacecraft when they were on their way to the moon, and it was only through a great deal of ingenuity and courage and help from the mission control staff and a lot of improvising that, and let's just face it, maybe a lot of luck, that they were able to make it back home safely. One of the most extraordinary stories of the 20th century, one of the great stories of the American space program. It's what they call a successful failure, where it could have, the astronauts could very easily all have been killed and lost in space forever. So they use the Apollo 13 mission, Geisler and Turek, as a metaphor to illustrate the precarious circumstances in which life in the universe finds itself. Just as those astronauts in that spacecraft stood on the brink of death, so is life in the universe balanced on a razor's edge, Geisler and Turek tell us. And using the story of Apollo 13, they illustrate five of what they call anthropic constants. And these five anthropic constants are oxygen level, the Earth's oxygen level, which is 21% of the atmosphere, which is necessary for life. A bit more oxygen in the atmosphere and things would spontaneously be bursting into flames. A bit less oxygen in the atmosphere and there wouldn't be enough for us to breathe. Anthropic constant number 2, atmospheric transparency. The Earth's atmosphere provides enough protection for life to survive solar radiation, but it allows enough solar radiation through to provide us with the light and the heat that we need to survive. Anthropic constant number 3, Moon-Earth gravitational interaction. Earth's gravitational relationship with the moon is strong enough that the moon acts as a stabilizing influence on Earth's rotation, but not so strong that the moon's gravity has a catastrophic effect on Earth's oceans or atmosphere. Anthropic constant number 4, the carbon dioxide level in the Earth's atmosphere. A higher CO2 level would mean a severe greenhouse effect, you don't say, while a lower CO2 level would make photosynthesis impossible. And then finally, anthropic constant number 5, gravity. If the gravitational force were stronger or weaker by only a very tiny degree, stars like the sun would not have formed, planets like Earth would not have formed, etc. Gravity, the gravitational constant, very, very important. These factors I've just summarized are covered over the course of several pages in the book, but the descriptions of them are really not any more detailed than what I just told you. Most of the space of those pages taken up in the book to talk about these various factors are spent describing the ordeal of the Apollo 13 astronauts and even reprinting lengthy blocks from the mission transcript. Is the survival of the Apollo 13 astronauts proof of divine design as well? That seems to be what Geisler and Turek are getting at. I love the Apollo 13 story, but its connection to the arguments being made here is so tenuous, is such a stretch, that it feels more like Geisler and Turek are trying to stretch a short chapter rather than picking the best possible way to illustrate important points in their argument. The Apollo 13 stuff just sticks out like a sore thumb. It feels arbitrary and just stupid. One other thing about these 5 anthropic constants, 4 of them aren't constants. The gravitational force is a constant, but the other 4, the oxygen level in the Earth's atmosphere, atmospheric transparency, the Moon-Earth gravitational interaction, the level of CO2, they merely describe present conditions. Go back far enough into Earth's past and none of those factors were the same as now. And if you go far enough into Earth's future, none of them will be the same as now. They are not constants. And that's really the most glaring flaw in this argument. Earth was not always capable of supporting life, and it will not always be capable of supporting life in the future. We exist during an interval in the history of our planet when its conditions are capable of supporting us. If this means that God designed Earth for us to be here, then it also means that you designed your aquarium to be a home for algae. Next section of the chapter, the anthropic principle. The design is in the details. Geisler and Turek reiterate how small changes in the nature of the universe would preclude the existence of life as we know it. Quote, "The extent of the universe's fine-tuning makes the anthropic principle perhaps the most powerful argument for the existence of God." Now, in the last video in this series, I said that I felt that the cosmological argument was the strongest of the classic apologist arguments. Unlike what Geisler and Turek are saying here, I find the argument from design to be by far the weakest of those classic apologist arguments and the least convincing. And I'll get to why a bit later. But first, in addition to those 5 anthropic constants that they just talked about that I told you, Geisler and Turek list 10 more constants that they claim point to a divine designer of the universe. And those constants very quickly are the balance of centrifugal planetary motion with gravity, which allows planets to remain in stable orbits around the sun. The rate of the universe's expansion, which is fast enough to avoid immediate collapse following the Big Bang, but slow enough to allow things like stars and galaxies to form. The speed of light, which is the way you can express all the other laws of physics. Every other law of physics can be expressed as a function of the speed of light. Levels of water vapor in Earth's atmosphere, creating the ideal temperature for life. Jupiter's gravity acting as a cosmic vacuum cleaner, pulling in asteroids and other objects that might otherwise pose a danger to Earth. The thickness of Earth's crust, thick enough to stabilize volcanic and tectonic activity, but not so thick that it traps too much oxygen from the atmosphere. The rotational rate of the Earth, which is fast enough to prevent drastic temperature changes between day and night, but not so fast that it creates high wind velocities that would make life difficult, if not impossible, to evolve. Although I doubt that Frank Turek and Norman Geisler would say evolve. Earth's degree of axial tilt, which allows for livable temperatures over much of the Earth's surface. The rate of atmospheric discharge, allowing for enough nitrogen in the soil, but not too active of an atmosphere, not too much fire and electricity in the atmosphere. And finally, the rate of seismic activity, which is enough to allow for the phenomenon of tectonic uplift, which cycles nutrients up through the ocean, but not so much that it seriously disrupts life with too many earthquakes or too violent earthquakes. Again, only 2 of these 10 factors, the speed of light and the expansion rate of the universe, which is also known as the Hubble constant, are actually constants. The others merely describe momentary conditions, most of which are extremely local. The fact that these conditions are mostly local and temporary kind of takes the starch out of this next quote. Quote, astrophysicist Hugh Ross has calculated the probability that these and other constants, 122 in all, would exist today for any planet in the universe by chance, i.e. without divine design. Assuming there are 10 to the 22nd power planets in the universe, his answer is shocking. 1 chance in 10 to the power 138. That's 1 chance with 138 zeros behind it. In effect, there is 0 chance that any planet in the universe would have the life-supporting conditions we have unless there is an intelligent designer behind it all. They neglect to mention that Hugh Ross is an apologist and a creationist who rejects evolution, and he is far more well known for being those things than for being an astrophysicist. He is not a renowned astrophysicist by any stretch of the imagination. Then there's also the problem of how exactly Ross was able to calculate the odds of the various factors in his calculation having the values that they have when he doesn't know how many possible values there are for each one. The only values we know that constants like the speed of light or the Hubble constant have are the values that they actually have. And that's actually what makes them constants, because they don't have variable values. But Ross seems to be treating the constants as though they were variables when he makes this calculation. But unless you know what other potential values a variable can have, you can't calculate the odds of that variable being of one of those particular values. So his calculation seems meaningless. And Geisler and Turek also miss the crucial point that Ross's calculation assumes that life as we know it is the only form of life possible. Without that assumption, Ross's 1 chance in 10 to the 138th power is meaningless. It's like dealing yourself a hand in a game of free cell and then looking at it and going, my God, what must the odds have been? We don't know that the Earth has been dealt the only possible winning hand. So you can point to 10 to the power 138 and insist on its significance all day long. It absolutely proves nothing. And again, these life-sustaining conditions on Earth are temporary. To carry that free cell metaphor forward, eventually the cat is going to jump on the table and fuck up all our cards. We're not going to get to keep these cards forever. Next section, proof for God. How do atheists respond? Geisler and Turek group atheist responses to the fine-tuning argument into 2 broad categories. Those who believe there is a designer but don't know who or what that designer was, and those who believe that the universe was designed but without a designer. And in order to explain how the universe became designed without a designer, Geisler and Turek say atheists resort to speculation like the multiple universe theory. And they have a great deal to say about the multiple universe theory. So let's take it one block at a time. First, quote, there are multiple problems with this multiple universe explanation. First and most significantly, there's no evidence for it. That sort of thing never seemed to bother you guys before. Continuing, quote, second, as we discussed in the last chapter, an infinite number of finite things is an actual impossibility. There can't be an unlimited number of limited universes. So are we assuming that the rules of our universe apply outside of our universe again? And why would we do that? And actually, Geisler and Turek are wrong when they say that there can't be an unlimited number of limited universes. Unlimited and infinite are not the same thing. The number of multiple universes doesn't have to be infinite. It could be finite, but unlimited, meaning that new universes are being created without any limit to how many universes there could be potentially, but always with a finite number of universes actually existing. Unlimited and finite are not the same thing. Quote, third, even if other universes could exist, they would need fine-tuning to get started, just as our universe did. So positing multiple universes doesn't eliminate the need for a designer, it multiplies the need for a designer. Is this a valid line of reasoning? Well, let's apply this rationale to something other than the universe and see if it comes out sounding stupid. Let's think this way about a snowflake. I have a snowflake right here. Let's say that I have this snowflake. It is of a very particular, very intricate design, and I believe that the only way to account for this snowflake is to assume that it was intelligently designed by a creator, a designer who intended it to look exactly this way. And if you were to say to me, but there are countless other snowflakes that exist right now, and plus all the other snowflakes that have existed in the past that no longer exist, plus you also have to account for the countless more snowflakes that will exist in the future that haven't yet existed, that haven't been created yet, all of which have equally unique and intricate designs on them. And it just so happens that you happen to pick up the snowflake that has this design, when actually there's nothing particularly special about either the existence of this snowflake or the fact that it has such a unique design. And I would say to you, but don't you see? By multiplying the number of snowflakes, you're not eliminating the possibility of a designer, you're multiplying the necessity of a designer, because just as this snowflake of mine must have been intelligently designed to have this particular shape, all those other countless snowflakes that did exist or do exist or will exist in the future must also have been intelligently designed to look just like they look. Have I convinced you that snowflakes are intelligently designed? I sincerely hope not. Quote, fourth, the multiple universe theory is so broad that any event can be explained away by it. Again, this sort of thing doesn't bother Geisler and Turek about God, who can also be used to explain anything and therefore is useful for explaining nothing. But they go on, quote, for example, if we ask why did the planes hit the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, we need not blame Muslim terrorists. The theory lets us say that we just happen to be in the universe where those planes, though they appeared to be flown deliberately into those buildings, actually hit the buildings by accident. This is a rather bizarre claim, and they go on to claim that the multiple universe theory also absolves Hitler of responsibility for the Holocaust because it allows us to believe that we just happen to live in a universe where the Holocaust appeared to be an act of genocide, but where the Jews secretly sent themselves to the ovens, which is a very, very strange thing to say in any context. Weird anti-Semitic fantasies aside, this is one of the most offensively stupid arguments in the book so far. The existence of infinite possibilities in infinite universes has nothing to do with either causality or morality in this universe. You can't absolve people of crimes by saying, well, this just happened to be the universe where this happened. Multiple universes or not, this universe is the site of where the 9/11 attacks did actually happen. They were not an accident, and we know that they were not an accident in this universe because we have evidence that they were a deliberate act. The fact that maybe, hypothetically, there exists a universe where they were an accident is irrelevant. We know what happens in our universe because we can gather evidence and interpret it using reason and the scientific method. And we hold each other morally responsible for our choices because, regardless of the limitless possibilities of multiple universes, here in this universe, we actually made those choices and are liable to face the consequences of them. Quote, "In the end, the multiple universe theory is simply a desperate attempt to avoid the implications of design. It doesn't multiply chances, it multiplies absurdities. Such a theory is, of course, nonsense, and its obvious absurdity reveals how strong the evidence for design really is. Extreme evidence calls for extreme theories to explain it away." You don't say. There's one more section to this chapter after this one. It's titled "God Look to the Heavens," but it's mostly just a prolonged appeal to the Bible, with Geisler and Turek quoting scripture and claiming that the heavens themselves are evidence for the existence and the glory of their God. So let's just skip that and end this video talking about why the teleological argument is so unconvincing. Do we really need extreme evidence to reject the notion of Earth, or indeed of the entire universe, being intelligently designed with us in mind? I don't think we do. I think there's a very simple explanation for why the universe appears to be fine-tuned to allow for our existence, but actually isn't. I made an entire video on the fine-tuning argument, and it's elsewhere on my channel. It's part of my Creationist Arguments I'm Tired of Hearing series, and if you want to see it, I invite you to go watch it. I'll leave a link for it in the description box of this video. And it gives a more detailed explanation, a more detailed examination of my response to this argument. The short version is this. Geisler and Turek have it backwards. They reason starting with us, and then they notice how well the universe seems to fit around us. But the universe existed for billions and billions of years before the origin of our sun and our planet, and Earth, in turn, existed for billions of years before the first humans appeared. To me, it's far, far more plausible to assume that it's not the universe which fits around us, but us who fit into the universe. And as maybe I'm a little too fond of saying, we aren't in the universe, we're of the universe. We're not just living here, we're a part of this place. We're products of this place, just like stars, just like planets, just like everything else. When we examine things like the gravitational constant, like the Hubble constant, the speed of light, the strength of the electromagnetic force, etc., we find that the values of these factors are just what they need to be in order to allow the existence of not only ourselves and other forms of life, but also planets, stars, galaxies, all those other things I just mentioned. But what else should we expect to find? These things exist in a universe that allows for their existence. Is that really such a mystery? How could it possibly be otherwise? I'm always reminded, when I think of the fine-tuning argument, of Douglas Adams's puddle theory, which imagines a rain puddle, noticing how well it fits into its hole, and concluding that the hole must have been made especially for it. And that's all you need. No extreme theories necessary, no sweat worked up. The universe wasn't made to fit us. The universe came first, and we, along with everything else, evolved to fit it. Well, that's it for this chapter, relatively short chapter this time. I'll be back in the next video in this series to look at Chapter 5 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which is titled The First Life, Natural Law or Divine Awe. And in that chapter they will continue to plumb the shallow depths of the design argument and try to argue that the design of life, in addition to the design of the universe and the design of Earth, testifies to the existence of God. So that should be fascinating. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Thank you for being interested in this. I always appreciate your comments. Please feel free to ask a question, to make an argument, to correct me on something. Anything that you feel necessary to respond to, please respond. I always enjoy reading the comments. That's it for this week. I will be back next week, in the next video in the series to handle Chapter 5, I just want to tell you guys that you are all perfect snowflakes to me. I will see you next time.